Get after it. Story number one. President Joe Biden gave a speech this past week in a commencement address at Howard University. He said in part, and I quote directly, the following: "Shadowed by fear, by violence, by hate, that you actually do, the re-election of the first black president, I hoped that the fear of violence and hate was significant. Losing ground after no longer being vice president, I became a professor at the University of Pennsylvania for 4 years. But in 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia, 3 neo-Nazi angry faces came out of a field, women with torches, trying not to banners in the woods, in the fields, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. That was a direct quote. I know it was hard to follow because it was nonsense. Now, I will admit, in all fairness, that this is a automated transcript noted, please verify accuracy before airing. I'm reading from this automated transcript from this nonsensical speech by our 80-some-odd president who's losing his ever-loving mind. I don't think I should reread that garble, but it should give you some insight into this speech and its lack of wisdom. But with that in mind, we understand that Joe Biden told that body of students at the historically black college, Howard University, that the greatest threat to America is white supremacy. The greatest threat to democracy is white supremacy. And I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting here before an all-black HBCU. Right, Joe. Let's take this for one moment, step by step. Once again, the United States of America is not a democracy. And I don't think we are having a battle over semantics. I don't think it's a slip of the tongue. I don't think it's shorthand. I think it's intentional to continue to describe the United States of America as a democracy. We are uniquely a constitutional republic, a republic in that we have a representative democracy through two bodies of the legislature, but more importantly, a legislature bound and limited by a constitution. It is a constitutional republic in the face of a democracy. We are not strict majoritarian rule. It is not 51% make the law. It is 51% encumbered by the eternal rights granted by God and enshrined by our founders in the United States Constitution. It's not a slip of the tongue because the modern left has, it's not new, for decades described this experiment in governance as a democracy. If it were a democracy, it would not be an experiment because that has been tried. And we know what happens. A majoritarian rule always descends into a rule of tyranny. The left is describing this country as a democracy because democracies are easily subverted. What's harder to subvert is an enshrined, backed up constitution. I don't think that's just background. I think that's foundation. And when you hear the left or the president of the United States talk about the sacred democracy, understand he is undermining with purposeful intent our sacred constitutional republic. If he means that the threat to America is white supremacy, well, then we need to invoke the 25th Amendment. There will be no greater sign of incompetence, no better evidence that he's lost his marbles, other than what I just read to you. That was garble. This country has faced over the last 2 decades clear existential threat from Islamic terrorism. This country currently faces existential threat from the Chinese Communist Party. This country has a border that is a sieve, absolute sieve. And we could talk about the changing face of America, but what it, in the immediacy, undeniable facts represents is a leaking dam of terrorists coming into this country. The numbers of people on the terror watch list who've been encountered, who knows about the gotaways, who've been encountered, has skyrocketed in a 2-year time frame. These are threats to the United States of America, and if you had a leader who's in charge of your national security who said, yeah, those are all nice, important, but the real threat is extremists. The real threat is Republicans. The real threat is those who disagree. The real threat is white supremacy. Invoke the 25th Amendment. There's no greater evidence than he's shirking his duties to you and to me to protect the security of this nation. But I don't think it's real. I don't think Joe Biden believes that the greatest threat to this country is white supremacy. For one, I can step back into who is Joe Biden. Joe Biden has the best, most obvious track record of racism of any living American president. That's a fact. Let's go back through some of his greatest hits. How about this? I don't know what he was talking about with corn pop and rubbing the hair on his legs in the public pool where he was in a primarily minority pool, and he talked about black kids rubbing his legs. I don't know. Weird. I do know that he worried about, what was it, his grandchildren growing up in a racial jungle? I do know he was the author of the 1993 crime bill that significantly increased the rates of incarceration for black Americans. I do know that he called Barack Obama good, clean, articulate, mainstream black. I do know that what did he say? You can't go into a 7-Eleven without an Indian accent. Did he even do an impression? I'm not sure on that one. I know I'm in the vicinity. I may not have hit the bullseye, but I'm on the dartboard. I do know that Joe Biden was friends with and counted as a mentor Senator Robert Byrd, who was a member of the KKK. And now this is your knight in shining armor, your white knight that rides in, ready to tell you about the threat to democracy being white supremacy? Please. No. Joe Biden doesn't believe this. It's a pander. And it's an obvious, naked, undeniable pander. He's playing America against itself on tribal divisions by race, pitting one group against another in service of his own advancement, in service of power. Joe Biden has no problem telling you that the real problem with this country is you. I know he's describing you as this white supremacist. Why? Because I can follow the bouncing ball, because I listen, because I can draw the conclusions, because he's all but said it. Look, anybody who disagrees is an extremist. MAGA Republicans, extreme MAGA Republicans, whatever. Parents who protest at school board meetings, domestic terrorist extremists targeted by the DOJ. Anyone who supported Donald Trump, insurrectionist. I mean, anybody that has disagreed in any fashion has been labeled as an extremist. And if you think of yourself as, well, I'm not MAGA, I'm not extreme, I'm just Republican, did you really think you were safe? How about Joe Biden as vice presidential candidate, running side by side with Barack Obama, who similarly spoke then before a crowd, primarily minority, primarily black. And what did he say then? Feigning a black accent, once again, racist. He said, they're going to put y'all back in chains. Oh, so Republicans' goal is to put you back in chains, to bring back slavery. Republicans want to bring back slavery. Anybody that disagrees is an extremist. The biggest threat to democracy is extremist MAGA Republicans, and the biggest threat to democracy, to America, is white supremacy. This is the destruction of America. This is tearing at the fabric of a polity, a group of people with a common interest. This is a distortion of reality, as we talked about in the last episode of the Cain Podcast. We're not. People are not, at least not yet, torn apart on the basis of skin color. We don't look at each other like that. We see each other as human beings. We do. We volunteer. We serve. We give to charity. We play sports together. We raise our children together. Almost every poll shows Americans do not act, are not, in fact, the way described by a racial arsonist sitting in the White House, ready to torch America for political power. That's what it is to pander. It's to tear you apart. It's to tear us apart. It's to tell you that your friend and his child that you've known all your life. It's to tell you that your neighbor and you do not have that relationship. Not unless you vote Democrat. Not unless you're a heroic savior. Not unless you're the white savior. Not unless you go into the voting booth and cast it for Joe Biden. And if you don't, you're a threat to America. Story number 2. Jordan Neely was 30 years old with a track record of 42 arrests, including several assaults on a subway, breaking more than one nose. He was not a 15-year-old Michael Jackson impersonator. The story of former Marine Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely on the New York City subway, wherein Penny subdued Jordan Neely with a chokehold that ultimately resulted in Neely's death, has been now covered and taken into the mainstream and suffers at the ripples in the pond, the reverberations, the stories outside the story. Resident racist at MSNBC, Mehdi Hassan, has tweeted that the coverage of the story and the story itself are a reflection of white supremacy, that Daniel Penny's, I think as he was described, prior employment as a Marine is irrelevant. To use past tense, died from a chokehold, isn't reflective of the murder that took place. There are those that point out there's some guy on Twitter that his name is like Aswayne Subjugar something. I don't know. He writes for Rolling Stone. By the way, what happened to Rolling Stone? Rolling Stone once covered bands and was seen as countercultural cool. Now, Rolling Stone is basically, Media Matters. Rolling Stone, like if you were ranking the biggest leftist hack enterprises, your top 3 would probably go Rolling Stone 1, Daily Beast 2, not Rolling Stone 1, Media Matters 1, Daily Beast 2, Rolling Stone 3, in that order. Aswayne, who writes for Rolling Stone, said something about like, all these tough guys say, that Jordan Neely was only being subdued by Daniel Penny, but there's 1,000 ways to subdue someone. You don't have to choke them to death. Aswayne's the kind of guy that would say, well, why don't you shoot the gun out of his hand? Why don't you shoot him in the leg? I mean, does somebody like this ever even, forget how they've ever had a violent interaction with someone. Have they ever even encountered a law enforcement officer and had a conversation? Or is the whole world a John Wick movie? But what really burns me up as this story continues to make its way through the public atmosphere, after we talked last week, of course, Daniel Penny was charged with second-degree manslaughter by Alvin Bragg in Manhattan, is the way that the media then portrays this story. And it's happening in a lot of places. The pictures that you see of Jordan Neely do not reflect the image of real life that would have been encountered that day by Daniel Penny. Neely's attorney showed a picture of Neely graduating high school. That would have been 12 years ago, cap and gown. While he's giving a speech saying that when someone is troubled like that, did you ever think about offering them some food or a word of encouragement? It's such an insult to anyone that's ever rode the New York City subway. These moments of violence, and reports are that Neely was saying stuff like, I would kill an MFer. I'll take a bullet. I don't care. That's reports by fellow passengers on that subway car who thanked Daniel Penny after the interaction, as though all he needed was a word of encouragement, and then he would have calmed down. Calmed down the same way he did when he punched a 67-year-old woman in the nose and broke it, or a 64-year-old man at a separate occasion in the nose and broke it, or attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old kid by dragging him down the street before he was stopped, or any of the other 39 other times he was arrested, a total of 42 arrests over the last decade. Look, Neely's life is tragic and sad in many ways. Apparently, when he's 14 years old, his mom was murdered and he spun out of control, drugs and mental illness. And that's sad. And his tragic ending to life is also sad. But there's a good chunk of time in between where his sadness was taken out on other members of this society. Arrested 42 times. For many of them, violent interactions on the subway. All of a sudden, he has an attorney, and all of a sudden, he has family members who are ready to show up for their payday and sue on behalf of Jordan Neely. But they weren't there during his life. I shouldn't say that. I need to be a bit more fair. They weren't there enough to make the difference in his life. I say that because, listen, mental illness is difficult. It's difficult for the system and it's difficult for the familial support system. What I mean by that is, what do we do? If you look at the correlation between the shutdown of mental institutions, insane asylums, and then the rising tide of violence and homelessness on the streets, you'll see a correlation. But do we take away people's constitutional rights? Do we involuntarily commit them? That's a tough question. That's a tough debate for society. And anybody that's had mental illness in their family knows at some point that person is tearing apart your family. And you have to stop. You have to stop enabling. Who knows what you can do? It's out of your control. Can you involuntarily commit a member of your family? Should you continue to house them as they represent a threat to your family? It's not easy. But all I do know is if that's going to be the case, I don't know that you can show up at the end of the life and all of a sudden get re-involved. But Neely's attorney has this picture of him as a high school graduate, and that's kind of what you're seeing on the media as well. I can't believe the media, I'm going to say we, at times, are showing pictures of him as a 15-year-old Michael Jackson impersonator on the streets of New York. He's 30. There's a big chunk of life that's been, including, I would assume, at least 42 mugshots, which would be more representative of the individual that was encountered on that train that day, ultimately by Daniel Penny. It's a visual lie. It's a trick. And I don't know why. To humanize the subject, is that the point? Look, there is no doubt there is humanity in that individual. And we need to appeal to our better angels to always understand people as individuals. And we can understand that sadness. We truly can. I'm not just saying this. I'm not just laying runway. I'm telling you. But we don't need to be manipulated by a media into what now is a criminal case. Because let me promise you one thing. Those passengers on that train, Daniel Penny, they did not encounter a 15-year-old Michael Jackson impersonator. It's the same thing with, you name the case. Trayvon Martin, they showed pictures that were incredibly outdated. So why are we doing that? It's a visual lie. We've done it over and over again in case after case, and it's designed to manipulate, to propagandize the public's mind. You can humanize, and I'm not even opposed to you showing those pictures, but they need to be proportioned. They need to be shown also with the relevant pictures from present day that would have shown us what happened that day on that train in New York City. It's been over, as of the time this is recorded, $1.5 million has been donated to the defense of Daniel Penny. And as I said last week, it's going to be a hard debate. As I say this, our society needs to have a culture that encourages, that provides an instinct of more men to act like men, to step up and protect women. If you want to see videos of like women getting punched on the subway and a car full of men doing nothing, they're easy to find. Doing nothing. We need an instinct of men stepping up, being brave and being strong and doing something. But if the system in response to that says, before you step in, calculate this. Are you ready to throw your entire life away as we drag you before the court system should anything? Same thing we do to cops, by the way. Anything goes wrong, we will drag you, your career, and your life before the system. That's the culture that we create. That's the instinct we foster, not one of men being men. Story number 3. Does Ja Morant not have Second Amendment rights? We are now in almost, well, as the time I record this, we're not, but by the time you listen, we will be set up for the conference finals in the NBA playoffs. It's Lakers and Nuggets in the West, and it is the Heat against, I don't know yet, the Celtics or the Sixers in the East. You can't see probably if you're listening to this on podcast, I'm not wearing a Celtics jersey or a Starbucks t-shirt. I'm wearing a Dallas hockey jersey because it's also Game 7 of the NHL Conference semifinals. So Stars and Kraken. Hey, by the way, count me in the group that likes the name Kraken. I'm in on that. Seattle Kraken. I think it's cool. It's different. You know how I am. I always want unique. I just don't want more generic, logos and team names. No more Tigers and Lions. No insult to the ones that already have those. But we don't need more Panthers, okay? I want some Krakens. I like Rangers if they fit geographically. More geographically appropriate and unique team names. Kraken, sea, Seattle, by the sea. I'm into it. Anyway, but not enough to root for the Kraken, obviously. They take on the Dallas Stars. We dropped the North when they moved south to Dallas from Minnesota. And it fits because Cowboys, Stars, Lone Star. It fits. Dallas Stars, Game 7. I love playoff hockey. I'll be real with you. I don't get into it until the playoffs. But I got to tell you, I don't think there's much better than playoff hockey. If you have a vested interest in a team that you like, it was last year that the Mavs were in the Western Conference Finals, and I was tuned into every single game. It was really good, but I have to be honest, I don't think it's as exciting as playoff hockey. I don't know, playoff hockey's awesome. So, go Stars. But back to the NBA. As we head into the NBA Conference Finals, Memphis Grizzlies star Ja Morant is in trouble once again. He's been suspended by the NBA in the Memphis Grizzlies, pending a league investigation. It was a few months ago, Ja flashed a gun. I think was he at a club? He flashed a gun. He got in trouble. And over the weekend, another video came out of Ja and his buddies in a car, kind of bouncing around, dancing to some song, and Ja flashed a gun again. And he's immediately suspended by the NBA. And here I am to ask you, does Ja Morant not have Second Amendment rights? Is Ja not allowed to have a life outside of work? Now, let me say this. This is not an endorsement of his lack of gun responsibility. You shouldn't be flashing a gun around. I don't think it's good to, preen with it on Instagram. But hey, man, I went shooting last week. Shot a bunch of awesome guns. I took videos. I was going to post it. I haven't yet. I may still. I shoot trap. I shoot ducks. I hunt. I shoot things with guns, and I'm going to post it from time to time. I have no problem with that. I'd like to think I would behave in a more responsible manner. And I don't know about the image Ja is trying to cultivate either. What is it? Is it thug life image? He's not a sportsman in that video clip. So I'm not endorsing the image, and I'm not endorsing the gun etiquette. But suspension? What's up? Are you not allowed to have a life outside of work? Why is him holding a gun in the video something that the NBA is allowed or is in the right for him to be suspended? He has a legal right, a Second Amendment protected legal right, assuming wherever he is geographically, he can own that gun. So why is it the NBA's business? Oh, it's bad role model for the kids. Great. You can judge it. I'm not stopping you from judging it. But I am stepping in to go, whoa, when it comes to his employer. And this being a suspendable offense. I don't know if that's the most predictable take, and you may get mad at me. Some people on social media seem to not like my take as well, because I think you can separate your own personal judgment from what you think an employer should be able to do with their judgment on your own legal rights. You see? You follow me? I don't want my employer's judgment to drive every aspect of my life when I'm behaving in a legal manner. inside the confines of my work environment, fine. But I don't get it. Like, I don't know. Honestly, I'm gonna be honest. I don't understand why some people, like in this business, say they have extramarital affairs. Why do they get fired for that? I know image, like, what does that have to do with their job? I don't, that just happened over at ABC. Like, that happened at, what? Wait, yeah, it happens everywhere. I don't get it. I mean, again, I can personally judge it, but why does the employer's judgment of it, when it's not illegal, mean that you lose your job? This whole idea, you're always a reflection of your employer. In the age of social media, you're always broadcasting and you're always a reflection of your employer. I think we go too far on that at some point. I mean, I kind of get it as well. Like, but if you're doing your job the right way and what you're doing isn't illegal, I need a better case to be made than they don't like the way John Morant looks online. I don't either. So what? Get over it. I don't know why that means he gets to be suspended. All right, that's going to do it for me today here on the Will Cain Podcast. Again, I hope you'll join me every night this week at 8 p.m. on the Fox News Channel. I will see you again next time. Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News Channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain Podcast for full episodes right now.